Laura Mitchell woke early that morning to the sound of the wind brushing against the windows. Her husband, Daniel, had already left for a week-long business trip, leaving the house unusually quiet. The silence felt strange, almost too heavy, as if the walls themselves missed the sound of footsteps and voices. She made herself a cup of coffee, took a seat by the kitchen window, and watched the neighborhood slowly come alive. The day stretched ahead, long and empty, and she wondered how she would fill it. Laura was in her late 50s. Graceful and calm, the kind of woman who had spent most of her life taking care of others. Daniel had always been a good man, but his work consumed him. Over time, their conversations had grown shorter, their laughter less frequent. It wasn't unhappiness that filled the house, it was absence. That kind of quiet that creeps in when two people love each other but forget to talk about it. Around mid-morning, Laura heard a car pull into the driveway. She frowned, not expecting anyone. Through the lace curtain, she saw a familiar face step out, a tall man in a gray jacket, holding a small box. It took her a second to recognize him. It was Ethan, Daniel's younger brother. She hadn't seen him in almost a year. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" He smiled, that same warm grin she remembered from years ago. "I was passing through town for work. Thought I'd stop by and check in on you." Laura's surprise softened into genuine warmth. "That's so kind of you. Come in. It's been ages." He stepped inside, brushing off the chill from the autumn air. The scent of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, and Laura poured him a cup without asking. As he sat down, she noticed how much he'd changed, older, more mature. But his eyes still carried that same brightness. So she began, "How's life treating you? Still working on those buildings?" "Still," Ethan said, laughing. "The projects keep me busy. But honestly, it's nice to take a break. I forgot how peaceful it is here." They talked for a while, their words flowing easily. Laura had always felt comfortable around Ethan, even when she and Daniel were newly married. Ethan had been the friendly younger brother who would help around the house or make everyone laugh at family dinners. Over the years, distance and life had pulled them apart. But now, sitting together again, that old familiarity returned effortlessly. Laura noticed how Ethan really listened when she spoke. Not just nodding, but paying attention, the kind of attention that made her feel seen. It was rare these days. Daniel, though kind and dependable, had become distant. Most of their conversations revolved around schedules, bills, and errands. When she mentioned Daniel's long trips, Ethan looked thoughtful. "He's always been dedicated," he said gently. "Yes," she agreed, smiling faintly. "Sometimes too much. I think he forgets life's happening while he's away." T nodded, then asked softly, "And you? How have you been, really?" The question took her by surprise. No one had asked her that in a long time. "I'm fine," she said automatically, but her tone lacked conviction. She sipped her coffee, hoping he wouldn't notice, but he did. Ethan leaned forward, his expression sincere. "You don't sound fine." Laura met his gaze, startled by his honesty. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then she smiled faintly. "You always did ask the hard questions." He chuckled. "Maybe, but I care about the answers." Something about his words made her heart tighten. It wasn't romantic, it was human. Someone cared enough to look beyond her practiced calm. The hours slipped by without either of them noticing. By the time Laura looked at the clock, it was past 2 in the afternoon. "Oh, you must be hungry," she said, standing. Ethan smiled. "You haven't changed at all. Still making sure everyone's fed." She made a quick lunch, sandwiches and soup, and they ate while watching the sky outside grow cloudy. The soft light made the house feel smaller, cozier. Ethan shared stories from his travels, some funny, some sad. Laura laughed more in that one afternoon than she had in weeks. But beneath her laughter chilled a subtle reminder of how much she missed having someone to talk to. Ethan, without meaning to, had reminded her of what connection felt like. When he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. The wind had picked up, leaves swirling across the yard. "You should visit more often," she said, smiling politely. "I will," he replied. But before he stepped out, he hesitated. Laura, can I say something? Of course. He looked at her for a moment, his expression gentle but serious. You look tired, he said softly. Not in a bad way, just. Like you've been carrying everything alone for too long. His words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to brush it off, to smile and change the subject, but instead she whispered, Maybe I have. Ethan nodded. You don't have to, you know? You've always taken care of everyone else. Just don't forget to take care of yourself, too. Laura looked down, her heart caught somewhere between gratitude and sadness. You sound like your brother, she said, but her voice trembled. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but I don't think Daniel says it enough. The honesty in his words hung in the air, quiet but powerful. She wanted to thank him, but her throat felt tight. Instead, she managed a small, Take care, Ethan. You too, he said softly. As the door closed, Laura stood there, her hand still on the handle. The house was silent again, but something inside her had shifted. Ethan's visit had stirred something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't attraction, it was awakening. The realization that she'd been moving through her days half asleep, waiting for something she didn't even know she missed. She made her way back to the living room, the air heavy with memory. For years, she had poured her energy into her family, her home, her duties. She had forgotten the sound of her own thoughts. Now, Ethan's words echoed in her mind. You've been carrying everything alone for too long. That evening, she tried to focus on her usual routine, cleaning up, preparing dinner, reading a book, but her mind kept drifting. The way Ethan had looked at her, not with judgment, but with quiet concern, replayed in her head. She realized how long it had been since someone had truly seen her not as a wife or a caretaker, but as herself. By nightfall, the rain had started, soft and rhythmic against the windows. Laura sat on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, staring at the flickering light of the television she wasn't really watching. A part of her wondered if she'd imagined the meaning behind Ethan's words, but deep down, she knew she hadn't. He had simply noticed what everyone else had missed as thunder rolled in the distance. Laura sighed and turned off the TV. The power of small moments struck her then, the way a simple visit could open hidden doors inside a person. She climbed the stairs, pausing by the window to look out into the night. The rain glistened against the pavement, and though the world outside was gray, she felt something light stirring within her, a quiet reminder that she was still alive, still capable of feeling, still someone worth seeing. Lying in bed later, she thought about Ethan's kindness, his concern, his sincerity. She knew it was harmless, that his intentions had been pure, but it had reminded her of something precious. She needed to remember herself, the woman who once laughed freely, who loved deeply, who didn't measure her worth only by how much she gave. As she drifted towards sleep, one thought lingered in her mind, the image of Ethan standing in the doorway, rain behind him, eyes filled with understanding. It wasn't the look of a man crossing a line. It was the look of someone holding up a mirror, showing her what she'd forgotten to see, and for the first time in a long while, Laura smiled before falling asleep. The evening felt strangely quiet after Ethan arrived. He had always been the calm one in the family, the kind who spoke little but observed everything. Olivia tried to stay busy, preparing dinner and setting the table, while her husband, Mark, went upstairs to take a work call. The soft light from the kitchen fell across Ethan's face as he leaned against the counter, watching her quietly. There was something different about him that evening, a sense of seriousness she couldn't quite place. "Need a hand?" he asked, breaking the silence. Olivia smiled lightly. "You can pour the wine. That's always helpful." He nodded and reached for the bottle. The way he moved, careful, precise, reminded her of how different he was from Mark. Her husband had always been loud, confident, but lately distant and distracted. Ethan, on the other hand, carried a quiet warmth. She had known him for over 15 years, yet that night, he seemed like someone she was meeting anew. As they sat down to eat, conversation flowed easily. They spoke about work, about the weather in Oregon, where Ethan lived, and about their childhood memories. Olivia found herself laughing more than she had in months. When Mark finally joined them, the room felt fuller, lighter. Even though tension still hid beneath the surface. After dinner, Mark went out to take another call, leaving Olivia and Ethan alone again. They sat on the porch, the cool air carrying the scent of rain. The crickets chirped softly, and the distant hum of cars filled the quiet moments between their words. Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. "You seem tired," he said gently. Olivia hesitated. "Maybe I am. Life gets busy, you know. Work, home, everything in between." He nodded slowly, but his gaze lingered as if he saw more than she wanted to show. "Mark told me you've been doing a lot lately, holding things together." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Someone has to." That answer seemed to stay with him. He didn't push further, but his silence said enough. Olivia felt something shift between them. Not attraction, but a kind of understanding she hadn't felt in a long time. Someone seeing her for who she was, not just for what she did. The next morning, the house was quiet again. Mark left early for a meeting, and Ethan offered to help fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen. Olivia tried to insist it wasn't necessary, but he was already rolling up his sleeves. The two of them worked side by side, their conversation flowing easily again. At one point, as she handed him a wrench, their fingers brushed lightly. It was a small, innocent moment, but it carried an unexpected weight. Olivia quickly looked away, embarrassed at how such a simple touch could make her heart skip. They finished fixing the faucet, and Ethan leaned against the counter with a grin. "They're good as new." She laughed softly. "You might have just saved me a call to the plumber." "It's the least I could do," he said, his tone gentle. Then, after a moment, he added, "You've done a lot for this family, Olivia. I don't think anyone tells you that enough." The words caught her off guard. For a second, she didn't know what to say. She looked at him, really looked, and saw sincerity in his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan smiled, then turned away, busying himself with cleaning up the tools. But something had changed. A subtle, unspoken awareness had entered the room that afternoon. Olivia went about her chores, yet her thoughts kept circling back to Ethan's words. It wasn't about romance or longing, it was about being seen. After years of feeling invisible in her marriage, someone had finally noticed her efforts, her quiet strength. Later that day, as she folded laundry, she overheard Ethan and Mark talking in the living room. Their voices were calm at first, but then Mark's tone sharpened. "You always act like you know better," Mark said bitterly. "Just because you fix things and listen to people doesn't make you a saint." "I didn't say that," Ethan replied evenly, "but maybe you should listen more, especially to her." Olivia froze. Her heart raced. She knew they were talking about her. Mark scoffed. "Don't tell me how to handle my marriage, Ethan." There was a tense silence, followed by Ethan's quiet voice. "Maybe you should handle it at all." Then footsteps. Mark stormed out, grabbing his keys and slamming the door behind him. Olivia stayed hidden, unsure what to do. When she finally stepped into the living room, Ethan was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said quickly when he saw her. "I shouldn't have said anything." She shook her head. "No, Ethan, you were right." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, everything around them faded. The air between them was heavy with emotion, not passion, but empathy. Two people caught between duty and honesty. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Olivia brought Ethan a cup of tea. They sat in silence, both lost in thought. After a while, Ethan spoke quietly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I see how much you give, and I hate seeing you not appreciated." Olivia looked down at her hands. "It's not your fault, Ethan. Sometimes love just changes or gets forgotten," he said softly. The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she looked away, blinking back the emotion she didn't want him to see. Later that night, when Mark still hadn't returned, Olivia found Ethan standing on the porch again. The cool night air brushed against them as they stood in silence. Finally, he spoke. "Olivia," he began carefully, "I didn't mean to overstep earlier, but there's something I need to say." Her heart pounded. "What is it?" He took a breath, searching for the right words. "You've always been kind to me, even when things between you and Mark weren't easy. I've respected you for that. But these past few days, I've realized how strong you really are, how much you hold inside." Olivia swallowed hard. "Ethan." He shook his head quickly. "No, please, I'm not saying this to make things complicated. I just needed you to know that you deserve more kindness from everyone, including my brother." His words were sincere, almost painful in their honesty. Olivia felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. No one had spoken to her like that in years. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." Ethan gave a small nod and stepped back. "Good night, Olivia." As he turned to leave, Olivia stood frozen, her emotions swirling. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this. Something inside her had changed. She could no longer pretend everything was fine. That night, as she lay in bed alone, she replayed every word Ethan had said. His voice echoed in her mind, calm, gentle, honest. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it carried a truth she could no longer ignore. Outside, the rain began to fall softly against the windows. Somewhere in the quiet, Olivia felt something new stirring inside her. Not love, but courage. Courage to face the truth, to look at her life and decide what she truly wanted. She didn't know where that courage would lead her, or what Ethan's words might mean for her future. But one thing was certain, nothing in her life would ever feel the same again. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll finally talk to Mark." But deep down, she knew that tomorrow's conversation might change everything, not just between her and her husband, but between her and the man who had seen her heart more clearly than anyone else ever had. To be continued, ... closing parenthesis, this version keeps the tone emotional, clean, romantic, and entirely suitable for YouTube monetization policies. No explicit content. No harmful themes, only mature emotional storytelling, focusing on love, honesty, and personal awakening. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting soft golden lines across Olivia's kitchen floor. The rain from the night before had stopped, leaving the world outside fresh and quiet. She sat at the table with a cup of coffee, her thoughts tangled between guilt, confusion, and an unexpected sense of peace. Ethan's words from last night replayed in her mind about kindness, strength, and how she deserved to be seen. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, but it had reached a part of her heart that had been asleep for years. Mark returned home just before noon. He looked tired, his shirt wrinkled, his expression unreadable. Olivia tried to read his mood, but he said nothing as he set his keys on the counter. The silence between them stretched like a wall. Finally, she spoke. "Mark," she said quietly, "we need to talk." He glanced at her, sighing. "About what?" "About us," she replied. "About how things have been." He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "Olivia, not now. I've got a meeting in an hour. Then when?" Her tone wasn't angry, it was tired. "We keep pushing this away. It's like we live in the same house, but in different worlds." That made him pause. He looked at her for a moment, then shook his head. "You're overthinking again. Things are fine." "They're not fine," she said softly. "They haven't been for a long time." Mark stared at her, his jaw tight. "Is this because of Ethan? Because he said something?" Her eyes widened slightly. "No, this is because of us. You and me. You stopped talking, Mark. You stopped caring." He didn't reply right away. The weight of her words hung between them. Then, quietly, he said, "I didn't stop caring. I just didn't know how to fix it." It was the first honest thing he'd said in months. Olivia looked at him, her heart aching. "Then start trying, because I can't do this alone anymore." Before Mark could respond, Ethan entered the kitchen. The air shifted instantly. He froze, sensing the tension. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I'll come back later." But Olivia stopped him. No, Ethan, it's okay. Mark stood straighter, his voice firm. Actually, maybe it's best if you give us some space. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. But before leaving, he looked at Olivia, just a brief glance full of quiet concern, and then stepped outside. The door closed behind him, leaving Olivia and Mark in silence again. Later that day, Ethan packed his things. Olivia found him by the car, loading his bag into the trunk. The afternoon sun was warm, but there was a heaviness in the air that neither of them could ignore. "You're leaving early," she said. He nodded. "Yeah, I think it's better that way. I don't want to cause more trouble." "You didn't cause trouble," she said gently. "You just told the truth." He gave a small smile. "Maybe, but sometimes the truth doesn't help. It only makes things harder." Olivia wanted to tell him to stay, not because of feelings she shouldn't have, but because his presence brought calm to a storm she didn't know how to face. But she knew he was right. "Thank you, Ethan," she said quietly, "for everything." He looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing her face. "Take care of yourself, Olivia. You deserve peace." When he drove away, she stood in the driveway, watching until his car disappeared down the street. The emptiness that followed felt strange, a mix of sadness and clarity. Days passed. Olivia and Mark tried to talk, but their conversations often ended in silence. Still, something had shifted. For the first time in years, they were acknowledging the distance between them. They began having dinner together again. Small steps toward something like understanding. One evening, while folding laundry, Olivia's phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "I hope you're doing okay. I've been thinking about our talk. You were right to face things. It's brave." Her heart fluttered, not with romance, but with appreciation. She replied simply, "Thank you, Ethan. I'm trying." That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the quiet street outside. Her life felt like it was caught between two worlds, the one she'd built and the one she was still searching for. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't go back to pretending. Weeks later, Mark surprised her. He came home early one evening, carrying flowers. Olivia blinked in surprise. "What's this?" He smiled awkwardly. "A peace offering, maybe." "I know I've been distant. I don't want to lose what we have." His voice was sincere, almost hesitant. For the first time, she saw vulnerability in him, the same man she'd fallen in love with years ago, hidden under years of exhaustion and silence. They talked that night. Really talked. About how they drifted apart. About their mistakes, their fears, and what they still wanted. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was honest. And that honesty was the first sign of healing. Still deep inside, Olivia knew that something fundamental had changed within her. Ethan's words had awakened something, a reminder that love wasn't just about loyalty or habit. It was about being seen, valued, and emotionally alive. Months later, life began to settle again. Ethan occasionally called or sent messages, always kind, always respectful. Their friendship remained grounded in understanding and gratitude. Olivia never told Mark about those messages. There was nothing romantic about them, only quiet support between two people who had faced truth together. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. He was passing through town and decided to visit. Olivia greeted him warmly, though part of her heart tightened at the sight of him. He looked the same, calm, thoughtful, but with a gentleness that always seemed to reach her without words. They sat in the backyard, sipping coffee as leaves fell softly around them. Mark was at work, and the world felt still. "It's good to see you," she said. "You too," he replied. "You look happier." Olivia smiled. "Maybe I am. Things aren't perfect, but I'm learning to breathe again." Ethan nodded. "That's all any of us can do." There was a quiet moment where neither spoke. Then Olivia said, "You know, what you said that night, it changed everything. It made me face things I'd been avoiding for years." He looked at her, his expression gentle. "Sometimes we need someone else to remind us of who we are." She nodded. "And sometimes we just need to listen." When Ethan left that afternoon, Olivia stood at the door watching him go. the same way she had months before. But this time, she didn't feel the same ache. There was peace now, gratitude, instead of confusion. She realized then that not every connection was meant to become a love story. Some people entered your life to awaken you, to help you see your worth, and to remind you that change was possible. Ethan had done that for her. That evening, when Mark came home, she greeted him with a smile. He noticed. "You seem different," he said. "Maybe I am," she replied softly. "I think I finally understand what I want, not just from us, but from life." He looked at her curiously. "And what's that?" "Honesty, effort, kindness," she said. "The simple things we forget." Mark nodded slowly, and for once it felt like he was really listening, as the days turned into weeks. Olivia felt a calm she hadn't felt in years. Her marriage wasn't perfect, but it was no longer built on silence. And though she didn't know what the future would hold, she had learned something powerful. Sometimes the right person doesn't stay forever, but they leave you better than they found you. One evening, while sitting on the porch, Olivia looked at the sunset spreading across the horizon. She thought of Ethan, his kindness, his honesty, the quiet way he had helped her find herself again. She smiled, whispered a quiet thank you into the wind, and watched the light fade into gold. Life had changed, not dramatically, but deeply. And for the first time in a long while, Olivia felt free.